A long-serving Metro Atlanta congressman faces a growing re-election challenge from inside his own party. State Representative Jasmine Clark is one of the latest Democrats to launch a primary challenge against incumbent Congressman David Scott. We sit down with her in this week's Sunday Conversation. You are running for Congress right now in the 13th District. Why do you want to serve in Congress?
You know, I have really thought about this a lot because I'm in the state legislature, and I will say I've had some good days and some bad days serving in the state legislature. But running for Congress is something that I think is the right time for me right now because of the political climate that we find ourselves in. When I first got elected in 2018, Donald Trump had just been elected in 2016, and he was making a complete mess of things in our country. And I answered the call in 2018 and said, I'm going to put my name on the ballot. And I came in what we refer to as the big blue wave in 2018. Fast forward to now, 2024 did not go the way that Democrats hoped that it would go. Donald Trump gets back in office, and he seems to be doing even more of a mess, making more of a mess than he did the first time around. And so in this moment I said, what is it that I can do that I'm not already doing? And I looked to what was happening in Congress, specifically with the impacts on public health, the impacts on higher education and education in general, the impacts on healthcare. I looked at all of those things and I said, what is my congressman doing right now in this moment to fight for us? And I'm listening to my constituents. They are asking the exact same question. And so I decided I'm going to put my name on the ballot.
What do you think the biggest challenge facing the country is right now?
I think we have a lot of challenges, and so it's hard to come up with a biggest. I'll be honest with you, when people ask me what's my favorite food, I'm like, there's too many foods out there for me to have a favorite. But if I were to try to whittle it down to a couple of key things, first of all, right now in our country, we have a crisis of health care. It is way too expensive. And right now we have people in office, unfortunately, in the majority, that do not see the value in making sure that we have a healthy society. Take that health part and then move it to public health, because the truth of the matter is right now we have a Robert Kennedy Jr. At the helm with HHS, who does not understand the basics of public health. He is anti-vaccine at a time where we really need to be ramping up the vaccinations that are available to people. He also just recently went swimming in a cesspool because he actually doesn't believe in the germ theory. Things like that, that's not what we need in our country right now, because we just got out of a pandemic. When
you're talking about him swimming in a cesspool, you're talking about it was a creek in Rock Creek Park, I think, in D.C.
Yes.
Right? Just want to be clear about that.
What they proclaimed as the dirtiest creek in that area. What I'll say is this: we need people at the top. We need people in Congress. We need people at the federal level that understand what everyday people are going through. People want to be able to go to the doctor, not just when they're sick, but for preventative care as well. People want to be able to know that the Department of Education or whatever it is in that moment is there, because there are people that depend on that, like students with disabilities, things like that. So I think the biggest problem that we have in our country right now, the biggest issue, is that the people at the top actually don't want to do their job. You have Donald Trump, who has appointed basically people who hate their job, who don't want to do those jobs. And we also have people that are saying, what is Congress doing in this moment?
There may be, I'm sure there are going to be Democrats and Democratic-leaning folks who hear your answer and they're nodding their heads along as they watch this. But Republicans will watch this too, and there may be some who hear what you're saying and they think, well, the modern Republican Party and at least President Trump's coalition has made a big effort towards what they call Make America Healthy Again. They're hearing you talk about the need for an emphasis on public health and health care. Are you aligned with the Make America Healthy Again group, or do you see it as two separate things?
I see it as two separate things, and I'm glad you brought up Make America Healthy Again, because that report in and of itself was filled initially until they got called out on it, was filled with a lot of things that were just not true. And that is what we are seeing in the country as a whole. That is just a symptom of what we are dealing with in our country, where you have a person who is charged with, quote, making us healthy, and they won't even take the steps to make sure that they're citing the research properly. So if we're not even going to put that much effort into it, then how much effort is actually going into making America healthy again versus pushing things like anti-vaccine, saying awful and completely inaccurate things about people with autism, and all of the other things that are a part of that report. So no, I am not on the same page, and in fact, I think that's why we need individuals like myself in Congress, unlike literally any other person, except for I think one person in Congress right now. I would be the first woman with a science PhD in Congress ever to serve in the United States Congress. So that lets you know that science voice is not there right now. I would love to be that science voice in Congress.
You're a Democrat.
Yes.
There is currently a Democratic incumbent in the 13th District.
Correct.
In Representative David Scott. You're challenging someone within your own party.
Yes.
Why?
I think that David Scott has done an excellent job in the last 22 years that he's been serving. We might not agree on every single thing politically, but for the most part, we align. We are in the same party. This is not about eating our own. This is about the fact that David Scott is now in a position where he is not able to serve in the same capacity that he has been serving. He lost his ranking membership and on the Ag Committee because his Democratic colleagues in Congress did not have that confidence in him. He has not been able to show up to as many town halls, do as many community events. He is not taking media interviews. This is all happening right now in a time where people are saying, hey, we need to hear from you. We need to see you. We need you to show up for us because we're concerned, we're vulnerable, we're scared. What are you doing? And this is not the time to be absent. And so, again, I applaud his tenure, I applaud his resume, but I think it is time for us to put some new voices in there, some new thoughts, some new perspectives, and I hope that the people of the 13th District will see me as a viable person to, take on that mantle.
Congressman Scott has been in office for over 20 years. He's about 80 years old now. It sounds like what you're saying is you don't think he's fit to serve anymore.
I would never question someone's fitness. I will leave that up to the doctors and things like that. But what I will say is that my constituents have said, I want something different, and I would like to be that something different.
What does the difference look like? If you win this race, how will you be different than David Scott?
So let's start with town halls. I have town halls a lot. I have community office hours a lot. I am personally at these events, and I'm showing up even when people are mad, because let's be clear, people are mad right now, and they're saying, what are you doing? And I have had to field those frustrations in my own town halls, but I'm there, and I'm there to do it, and I'm there to respond with empathy, because I understand, because not only am I running for Congress, I am feeling the same weight of what's happening in our country in my own home. I'm a mother. I feel what a lot of parents are feeling about, their concerns about the world that we're bringing up for our children. I go to the doctor just like everybody else, and I do not like getting that bill just like everybody else. And that's with insurance. And I understand that there are other people that have even more of a difficult time, trying to figure out how they're going to pay those bills, how they're going to pay for those prescriptions. I live that life too, so it's not just about running for an office. It's about being a part of the community. I think that's a big difference between myself and the incumbent, is I will show up.
I asked you what you thought the biggest challenge facing the country is. I want to zoom into a statewide lens as well. You're obviously currently a state legislator. If you rise to Congress, you represent the nation, you also represent our state. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing Georgia right now?
I think the interesting, you're probably going to say, oh, she's saying the same thing over and over again, but the truth of the matter is healthcare is a big deal in Georgia. So we're one of the few states that did not expand Medicaid, which means there are a lot of working Georgians right now that do not have access to affordable healthcare. What's happening at the federal level is only making that worse. The big bloated billionaire bill that just passed through the House and is now in the Senate, that bill will have an impact on Georgians right now. And it's not just people who are on Medicaid. The effects, the impact of people losing their health care or not being able to access health care will spread out beyond just that person and their household. It is a community issue, it is a public health issue. And so I do think that access to healthcare, access to affordable healthcare, being able to afford your prescriptions, being able to, age in place, all of these things that are in jeopardy right now in our country, that's one of our biggest concerns.
Healthcare seems like a really big focus of yours.
It is.
I want to ask you about some international issues as well. Because if as a member of Congress, if you win this race, it's not just domestic issues that get onto your plate. It's the world's range of challenges and problems that our Congress has to work through, along with the executive branch and the judiciary. We're talking on Monday, just about 36 hours ago, the United States conducted a series of airstrikes on targets inside of Iran for the stated purpose of destroying Iran's nuclear capabilities. Do you agree with these airstrikes?
No. And plain and simple, it's not that I don't agree with the airstrikes themselves. That is debatable. What I don't agree with is the way that this was carried out. I do not believe that this was done constitutionally. I would be a member of Congress if the voters would have me, and the Congress should have input when we're going to do something as impactful and significant as what just happened this last weekend. And the fact that they weren't brings up questions of constitutionality of whether or not this should have even been done. But also, we cannot act on impulse, especially when that means that we might be putting our troops, diplomats, Americans that are just over in that region in danger. We have to acknowledge that every decision that we make will have some sort of consequence. And while the president is like, oh, hey, I just dropped all these bombs, now we're gonna have peace. He can't make that promise to the American people. We don't know what this is, we don't know what the downstream effects of this will be. But what I do know is that this is not a reality TV show. This is real life. And we have to make decisions based on what the real life consequences would be. We need someone at the helm that will listen to their national security advisors, that will not, say things on social media for attention that are not necessarily true. And the American people need to know that the person that is leading the way is actually doing it for all the right reasons. I bring this up to say, I just spoke at the No Kings rally. So millions of people across the country, including about 10,000 right here in Atlanta, marched, protested, rallied, and said, we do not want kings in America. What Donald Trump did, where he unilaterally decided, hey, this is what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna go over here and do this thing and then, yell victory, that is what a king would do. And people have resoundingly said they do not want that.
There are probably going to be some people who hear you say that, and they may push back a little bit and say that the president is the leader of the executive branch, he's the commander-in-chief of the military, and there's a long history of presidents from both the Democratic and the Republican Party of authorizing these types of unilateral strikes without congressional approval. What would you say to that pushback?
I think what we're talking about is America going to war? And the Constitution is clear. We have a system of checks and balances for a reason, because if you are bringing us into war, if you are declaring war or entering us into a war, Congress needs to have some input on that. And that is the way that is written in the Constitution. And I think the people who put it that way, they did that because they did not want these types of unilateral things that will impact so many Americans.
You talk about these recent protests, these recent rallies. We've seen them in Atlanta, we've seen them around the country. I know, and you know, that there's a lot of frustration within the Democratic Party and the Democratic base right now, and some of it is directed at Democratic lawmakers. Some grassroots folks we hear from a lot are making the argument that Democratic lawmakers in office right now are not doing enough to, in their view, stand up to the Trump administration. But we hear from lawmakers sometimes who say, effectively, it's tough when you're in the minority party. If you win this race, how do you do it?
So I have the experience of being in the minority party for the last 4 terms in the Georgia State House. So I know what it's like to serve from the minority. I know what it's like to not have the numbers to pass the bills that you want to pass. But I also know what it's like to demand accountability, to ask the right questions, to call people to the carpet and say, what you're doing is wrong and you need to stop doing that. I have that experience. I have called out Brian Kemp during the COVID pandemic when he fabricated the numbers a little bit on graphs at the beginning of the pandemic. I have called out now Senator, he was a representative at the time, Ed Setzler, when he made up a fake organization for the abortion ban bill. I have, even called out our state school superintendent when he tried to say that AP African American Studies was, quote, a divisive concept, and therefore he was not going to fund it. I have a track record, even with being in the minority, of still standing up to Republicans. That's what Democratic voters are asking for. Stand up for us, be vocal, be bold, be intentional. Don't just back down and say, oh, there's nothing I can do because I don't have the numbers. There are still things that you can do. There are still things that you can say. And people want to know that someone is fighting for them. That is why they send representatives to Washington, D.C. to do exactly that. And I'd also argue that in 2026, we have real potential for the Democrats to not be in the minority anymore if people get out and vote. But that does start with people having confidence in the people on the ballot.
We've talked a lot about health care. We've talked about the Democratic Party. There are a lot of other issues as well. One of the issues we hear about the most from voters of all persuasions and all demographics and all geographies, one of the issues we hear about the most is cost of living. If you're elected, what will you do to ease the cost of living burden that so many families in Georgia and around the country are struggling with right now?
So I think cost of living is something that hits home very much for me, because even my cost of living has gone up. So let's start with the fact that we have a budget out there that wants to take away SNAP benefits. And someone might say, well, I don't have SNAP benefits. I don't even know what those are. But that does impact so many other things. It impacts our farmers. It impacts school lunches. It impacts other parts of our lives. Not just that. When we talk about cost of living, let's talk about the cost of actually owning a home, getting a home, buying a home. We have corporate landlords that are basically these investment groups that buy up all the properties, basically boxing out any regular individual family that just wants to go and buy their first home or maybe buy their second home. They are not able to compete with these investment groups. They end up being boxed out of that process to where homes are unaffordable. And then these same investment groups rent these homes out for rents that are just extremely unaffordable for a lot of people. And then because they are not even in the state of Georgia, these landlords are not actually taking care of the property. They are not there to, answer the call when there's something wrong on the property. All of this is impacting Georgians. It's why I am happy that in the State House, we did pass a bill that says if you are going to buy up all of these properties, you need to have someone here in the state ready to answer the call. But I think we need to do something on a much larger scale. I would love to see something like that done in Congress. I know Senator John Ossoff has mentioned also trying to rein in some of these corporate landlords and the things that they do. But since being in the House, I have had the opportunity to fight back against slumlords, to now fight back against these corporate landlords buying up all the properties. And at the end of the day, we need to be looking for policies that make it easier for people to purchase their own home.
I want to end here. You've been very kind with your time, but I want to end here. You are not the only challenger in this race. There are a number of others who are, just like you, seeking to unseat Representative David Scott. How do you see yourself differentiating yourself from your competition?
Absolutely. So first, I am the only person in the race right now with a PhD in science and the ability to really speak to the public health issues that our country is facing, not just from, a position of me feeling it, but from a position of expertise. Secondly, I am one of a few in the race that has been elected, and in my role, I have had to stand up to Republicans at every level. During the campaign process, Republicans have constantly attacked me because I sit in one of the few competitive seats in the State House. In the legislature itself, I have had to fight back against bad policies both at the committee level and in the chambers, and I've never been afraid to stand up to bad policy, while at the same time, I do have a track record of being able to work with Republicans on good policy. All of my bills that I have introduced, I won't say all, let me not be an absolutist, most of my bills in the State House have been bipartisan, and that I have sponsorship from both sides of the aisle. So I'll work with Republicans on good policy. I can do that same thing in Congress, but on bad policy, I stand up for Georgians, and that's what I've done.
Representative Jasmine Clark, thank you.
Thank you.
A few notes about people mentioned in this interview. Congressman David Scott did not respond to multiple requests for comment. Governor Brian Kemp's spokesperson, Garrison Douglas, sent us this statement, quote, "Georgians know who fought for both their lives and livelihoods and successfully led our state through one of the toughest challenges we've ever faced," end quote. A Georgia Department of Education spokeswoman said the superintendent was concerned the AP African American Studies course could violate the state's so-called divisive concepts law, but after getting legal guidance from the Attorney General, the course was allowed to continue. And finally, State Senator Ed Setzler, when asked about Representative Clark's claim that he made up an organization during the Georgia Heartbeat Bill debates, said, quote, "I have no idea what she's even talking about," end quote.